Hi, we're back with another tutorial, and this one's going to be slightly different than my other ones. It is going to be for VST, and what we'll be using today is something a little bit different. It is an emulation of a chip used in the late 80s and early 90s to generate the soundtracks for various arcade games via FM synthesis. It is the wonderful, amazing, and without a good tutorial, VST VOPM. And here you can see it in all its glory. And we'll actually just open it up in the Renoise window here. And we'll get to it. Now, I've put a couple gainers on the channel just because the output of VOPM is very quiet. And it does need to be boosted a little bit just so we can hear it well enough. So, let's get right into it. So, first thing you'll notice with VOPM is it's got a very strange interface. It's got all these sliders with weird abbreviations instead of actual function names. You've got your window up here, which has a lot of confusing things in it. And then it's got some stuff over here. And you might figure out what LFO is, but all this other stuff seems like it's a little bit confusing. FL, AMS, PMS. What kind of synthesizer has PMS? Well, VOPM does. Anyways, the first thing you might notice is that when you play VOPM in its default settings, you get quite a wonderful sine sound. But because this is an FM synthesizer, you may be thinking, well, sines are nice, but I want more complicated sounds out of this. And VOPM can deliver that somewhat in spades. It is rather interestingly functionally limited compared to other more modern FM synthesizers, but it does have a lot of pluses, and it also delivers a very authentic sound for classic or chiptune style FM synthesis. And it's one of the reasons why I am very, very fond of this synth. It gives you limitations that you can work around and be more creative with. So, I'll kind of go through the basics of getting sound out of VOPM and then into some of the more advanced functions. Obviously, if you try to mess around with these sliders and stuff, you'll find that only the bottom ones do anything right now. And that is because only the operator mask for C2, which is the bottom one, is active. And you'll see here that in the signal flow goes M1, C1, M2, C2 in this particular algorithm. C2 is the output, and that's the only thing that's giving sound right now. So in order to do some FM synthesis, we're going to turn on the operator mask for M2, the modulator, and that is modulating C2. And now that we've got everything turned on, when we play, we get some pretty harsh FM sounds. And that is because modulator 2 is modulating C2 fully. So in order to change that, the most salient control is this TL, and counterintuitively, and a lot of VOPM works counterintuitively, we will raise these levels in order to lower the amount of FM. So let's put this at 34. Let's put it at 19. The other thing about VOPM that's a little bit weird is the octave can be a little bit high. So you can now hear clearly the FM. Okay, so what are these other controls? AR is the attack rate, and this will probably make a lot more sense if I put them on the modulator rather than the carrier. You have to think of these controls in FM. FM is kind of all about the envelopes. So in the output one, all these controls are kind of like the main envelope you would have in an analog synth, the volume envelope. So if we wanted more attack on the sound, we would just, raise the attack or whatever, the AR attack rate on this chip. But if we wanted to have the thing have an instant attack, but we want the body of the FM sound to fade in, the modulation to fade in, then we would use the make the attack longer here. And you can hear right at the beginning, you can hear, I'll slow it down. I'm just hitting the key, and you hear the sine sound, but if I hold it down, you can see that it's just a nice slow attack that comes in. And that is the key to FM synthesis. One of the two main things that will shape all your sounds. So, we'll just kind of get a nice horn-like attack there and get a little cheesy brass sound. And then we'll go to the next one, or rather the next two, which is the decay 1 rate and the decay 2 level. When the decay 1 rate will decay it to whatever the decay 1 level is. So I'll make this fast. You can sort of hear the relationship. So these two are shaping kind of the initial sound. So if we have a slow decay rate and a decay level that's medium, you can kind of see the sound. And hold on. So I'm just going to draw something here. So with the if we have the and we'll get a nice kind of thick brush. If we have the attack of the main sound here, then we can kind of have the timbre of the sound in the FM getting affected by the attack, and then the decay rate to whatever the decay level is, and then it'll stick there and then go whatever is at the release rate. So this is AR, and then this is D1, which controls the decay rate, and then this is D1L, D1R, D1L. Okay, so that's kind of like the basic relationship of the sound, and that's most of your tonal shaping possibilities right there. Next one is D2R, and this one, it's kind of hard to explain. It sort of affects the how fast it goes between this and the release rate. It will like lower as the release rate is going. So when you key off, it will sort of affect what the value is on how slowly the release rate goes. It's a little bit weird. I don't know if I've explained it that well. KS is just key switching. It's a FM thing where you get more or less FM depending on where on the keyboard you play. For example, if you put it way high up, you'll get more Or you'll get less lower. You may or may not want to use it depending on the patch. It can be kind of tricky to work around for me. I don't really typically use it in a lot of my sounds. But that's what it does. And then before we get into MUL, which is the multiplier, we'll just go through DT1 and 2. Because the multiplier is obviously what would be ratio on your other synths. Actually, we'll just go into the multiplier. Fuck it. Multiplier, it's your ratio. Pretty self-evident. This DT1 and DT2 is a little bit stupid. DT1, you want to set it to 4 all the time. I don't know why the default is 0. 4 is no detune. I don't know how to really illustrate this. Maybe hear the sine. Maybe if your ear is really good, you can hear it detuning, but it will detune things slightly against each other. Where 4 is the minimum, 7 is the maximum, and 1 is the other maximum, and 0 won't detune anything in a weird way. I don't know why it's set up that way, but it can kind of, hold on. We'll change to another algorithm. We'll turn these two off, and we'll turn these two on. Oops. And I'm just holding one button, and you can hear the oscillators beating against each other. That's because they're detuned. They're phasing in and out. So that is kind of what that does. Now the other one, DT2, is the fun one. DT2 is super nasty. It is the heavy detune. And what it does is it will detune things less than an octave, but way more than this, so that you can get some quite inharmonic sounds. And if I bring these both to 1, you can easily hear that you get just really, really metallic, really inharmonic kind of sounds. So those are the basic functions of these, and kind of your primary tools for shaping the sound. And there are a couple other features that are pretty neat. So we'll go into this one, the second algorithm, and you can see that M1 is activated, and it can modulate M2. Or rather, here, we'll go to this one. M1 can modulate C2, which is our carrier that is getting rid of the sound and pumping it into our speakers. And this one is, we'll just set it up in a very basic patch, and obviously the TL is very high. And this one has a special feature, only this one. You'll see in here in the operator display, it has something called FL, and that is the feedback loop. And M1 and only M1 can feedback into itself. So you can hit that and get some very saw-like sounds. which is very useful for getting more aggressive and cutting sounds, especially combined with other operators. And then finally, the other things that you need to know about would be how to use the LFO. And the LFO is really kind of strange to use, because in order to activate it for a specific operator, you need to hit this thing. And then we've got it activated for operator 1, M1. And then we need to put the frequency count to a certain amount. And then AMD and PMD. AMD is amplitude modulation depth, and PMD is pitch modulation depth. And then this is obviously the shape of the LFO. So you can see we've got it set to some pretty audible settings, but we're still not hearing the LFO. What we also need to do is put these up. And this is amplitude modulation sensitivity. And this is pitch modulation sensitivity. And depending on what you set these to, you will get varying amounts of whatever this is. So you kind of need to correlate between the two values in order to get everything to sound right. And then the other one is noise frequency. If you hit that noise button, it will use whatever thing is on C2 or the output oscillator or operator, and NFRQ just changes the value of that noise. I don't know. It's fairly useful if you want to make hi-hats or something, but if you're just trying to do FM programming, it's not a very good function, because it cuts out all the other sound that everything else makes. So that is the complicated but ultimately simple functions of each of these things. So kind of to illustrate the point, we will go in and load up an init patch and kind of go through making a couple really basic sounds. And this should sort of illustrate what we kind of want to do to like actually program this thing. So first things first, we'll take a sound out of our heads and kind of just go with it. So first sound I want to program is a bass sound. So I'm just going to move my stuff out of the way. And we've got our wonderful sine wave. I want to move the detunes to 4 so that nothing is detuned. And we can do detune things later. And this RR, 4 is way too high of a release rate. You'll want it like 8, 9, 10, something with a bit more of a quick release rate when the key goes off. So, first things first, we definitely want a kind of harsher, buzzier sound. So, and because this is going to be a low bass sound, we probably want our multipliers at 0. Okay, so that's a decent kind of start. And then we kind of want to shape the bass sound. It's going to have a fast attack because it's a bass. And then the decay, okay, so that kind of gives us our basic bass sound, and we've kind of got the basic timbre, but it's kind of lacking a bit of a punch. And we could give it a bit more of a, a clicky kind of a sound. And we're going to put this gainer up so that you can actually hear this bass sound. Okay, so it's kind of got the envelope to it now, but it needs a little bit more. So we're going to put in a third operator, and because we don't want everything to get blown out, we want this to kind of be the attack of the sound. And we also want it to be a little bit higher because it's going to be the upper part of the bass. So we're going to keep the multiplier around 1. So it's going to be a little bit of a higher ratio. And then we're going to put the attack really high. And then you can kind of hear our bass sound kind of taking shape. So you can sort of go and see, and it's just like getting the click of the attack right can be really a little bit of experimentation with these values. Maybe we want this a bit higher. And then because of we want maybe a little bit more edginess to the sound, we'll actually also have this at 1, but we'll mix this in very low and put the feedback loop off. And then make this kind of really another fast attack sound. And then we'll put the multiplier up a bit more. And of course it helps to turn it on. And then to make the sound a little bit fatter, we can detune these operators a little bit. And then we have our bass sound. And you can obviously hear that would be quite an aggressive bass sound by any means of the imagination. And then, of course, if you wanted to use one of the new Renoise 3 features, maybe you could, I don't know, make a custom doofer that would just add some kind of filter setup. And we'll turn this gainer down. And, you know, just give it a little bit of... You know, something simple like that. But you don't need to. Maybe you're making authentic YM21 music and you just want to use pure FM sounds. That's awesome too. In fact, it's even more awesome because you're being old school and hardcore, which is great. So, that's one example of just kind of the programming mode you want to be in. And then to kind of illustrate the LFO features, let's introduce another VOPM, and then let's give it some chords to play. And those are way too high of a register. And the most predictable chord sequence ever. Okay, so we have our basic chords, and we'll turn this up just so we can hear it. So algorithm 5 is really good. This one will have one operator modulating all 3 operators, which combine into an output. So M1 is going to be doing most of the modulating, and then these ones are going to be set into various different settings, and we just want to make sure all these settings are identical, get the detune right. Okay, so one of the things that kind of helps me is thinking of each of the pairs, or each of the ways these chain together, whether you have one or two or three in a row, as an operator or as an oscillator in another synth. And you think about like the kind of shape you want. So I'm just going to solo this. You can hear our little chord progression we've got there, the most boring chord progression ever. And we will just put these around 10. Okay, so you can kind of hear the sound we've got now. So say we want to set the value of these. We'll have this multiplier at 1, but we want one at a low octave, so that'll be 0. We want one at a medium octave, and we want one at a high octave. So we set the multipliers accordingly. Now, this will change the kind of timbre a little bit, because the relationships between the operators do kind of make different fundamentals, but the basic relationship kind of holds in place, where each of these will roughly be 1 or 2 octaves above the other one. And then we're going to detune these. And then we're going to set the decay levels a little bit low, just so that we have a little bit of movement to the sound, and the decay rates don't have to be too high. We'll keep those a little bit. And then we want to think about the attack portion of the sound. It's a little bit static right now. It's definitely got to be faster, but it's also got to have more decay to it. But not that much. We want it to still have a bit of a bite. But not past the transient. Honestly, these could do with being a bit faster. Okay, so we've kind of found our balance there, and we've gotten a nice sort of horn sound that covers a decent amount of the spectrum, and kind of gives us another really basic bread and butter sound of FM. So what we can also do to kind of like illustrate the power of the envelopes is we're just going to add a little bit of vibrato to this first one. So we want it to be fairly fast. Give it this. Okay, so not the most impressive sound technically, but in a mix, you have a decent horn sound. And that is kind of the zen of programming VOPM. It's a really complicated beast, but if you kind of think of it as relationships based around how the envelopes are described, and how each of these are affecting the sounds that you hear. Not just multipliers and ratios, but also the kind of like initial parts of the sound, or what makes up what like section of the sound. You can sort of get a lot of different timbres, and you can see these are quite different sounding instruments, but they're just created by different ways you approach the structure of the patches. The envelopes are different, but the way of programming them is the same. And it's definitely more complicated than subtractive synthesis, which is very straightforward, and the relationships are very easy to grasp. But when you're thinking about things in the FM way, you have to kind of wrap your head around a different sort of paradigm. And for example, we've now got a very glassy sound out of that. I hope I'm not being long-winded, but that is the fundamentals of VOPM. If you have any questions or want to comment, please do put them in the comment box. I do read all of them, and I hope this helps out to you guys. So, happy tracking, and hopefully I hear some awesome, authentic YM2151 music because of this tutorial.